Tony and Jill Dinnis were reported missing after disappearing from the Middelrus farmhouse. All their belongings were left intact and undisturbed. eNCA reporter Dasen Thathiah is in the area trying to speak to family and neighbours. Hi, Dasen, and thank you so much for joining us. How much more information were you able to get from neighbours and family in terms of the whereabouts of the couple?
Well, let me start by telling you that this is a story that has really more questions than answers at this point. The community here is shocked by what's happened, but perhaps let's give you some context, that we have about that couple that lived here. So they've been in the area, and this is a very rural area. You can judge that by the background that you're seeing at the moment. They've lived here for about 6 or 7 years, and they were living in a farmhouse. And it was another family that was here that had put them up there because they wanted to move into the area. So essentially, it was just an arrangement to make sure that if they lived there, they would pay for their own utilities and they would live there in the house and take care of the property while they were here. So up until this point, there had never really been any issues in the area. It's a fairly peaceful part of town. It's quiet, and everyone knows everyone here, really, because it's such a small and close-knit community. There are few people that live here. But on the 27th of August, that was when the property owner had gone to that house, and that was the last interaction that he had had with the Dinnises there. And during that interaction, they spoke briefly, and he had dropped off a parcel of food that he had left with them, which he often did, parcel of meat, in fact, that he had left there. And on Tuesday, when he had gone there to perform some maintenance on the property, that was when he discovered that something was amiss. They were not there. But interestingly, or intriguingly rather, there was no sign of any disturbance. So the gates were locked, the dogs were locked up inside, everything was as it should be, as though they had left of their own accord. That's what it looked like at the beginning. In fact, we were told that there were also plates or meals that were left there that were half eaten, and everything else was locked up, and there was no sign of any belongings that were taken at the time. And that was really where it all started, and that was when a missing persons report was then put out, and a search was then established as well. A search party was established, but there was still no sign of them as of last week. But it's only today that we're now finding out that there were new developments, and in fact the Hawks are investigating a kidnapping case.
And Dasen, what do we know in terms of what police so far are willing to share with us with regards to the scene or the farmhouse in itself, whether it was in disarray? Does it look like foul play? Was the place vandalized? What do we know so far?
Well, the initial perception, I think, that was gathered at the scene was that there was one of two things that had happened. Either they were taken or that they had left of their own accord. But it didn't appear that there was any struggle that took place on the property. But that's why initially it was treated as a missing persons cases that we were looking at. And those searches were taking place all of last week. There were various agencies that were involved. Locals here as well took part in that search. But the development came when there was apparently a ransom demand. And that was when the Hawks had taken over the case. They've been looking at it as now a kidnapping case. So certainly they believe that there is foul play. They're now saying that it's at a very sensitive stage. There are not too many details around what a possible motive could be, but they are saying that they're handling the case, and hopefully there will be a positive outcome, and that couple, the Dinnis couple, will, both of those members in their 70s, hopefully they will be returned safely to their families.
And the neighbours, has anybody come forward if they've seen anything suspicious or somebody that is not familiar in the area? You did say that it is quite rural, and typically these would be very distant in terms of the neighbours. The vicinity is quite far from the neighbour. So if you were to just give us a sense, were you able to touch base with the neighbours? Anybody coming forward?
Well, firstly, let me just give you a lay of the land here. So, as you rightfully said, it is very rural. I mean, these are dirt roads that we are talking about here. Neighbors are fairly far apart from each other. And if you talk to people in the area, they'll also tell you that it is quite quiet. I mean, we're standing on a road that's not far away from where that farmhouse is. And this is essentially what it looks like. So it's probably about 40 kilometers away from the Moy River town. But something else that's important to note here is that there's very little cell phone signal. Even to do this crossing now, we had to drive around the area to find a spot where we would be able to communicate with you. So that's really the context that we are talking about here. On the day, it doesn't seem like there was anything untoward. No one that we've spoken to here recalls anything that stood out. And I think that that has added to the mystery here about exactly how this couple disappeared from that house. And that's what it looked like. It really looked like a disappearance. The people that we spoke to initially were saying that it literally looked like they had vanished from that home. So hopefully that police investigation now will be able to turn up a lot more than that and find out how it is that they were removed from that house, as rural as it is, and how they were taken away, and ultimately leading to what is now a kidnapping case.
Dasen, thank you so much for your time. That's eNCA reporter Dasen Thathiah out in the area of Middelrus, a farmhouse where an elderly couple last week were reported missing. In this case, we're also hearing from police that this is being treated as a potential kidnapping because they have just simply disappeared from the face of the earth. And this is Tony and Jill Dinnis, who were reported missing after disappearing from their farmhouse last week. But that's where we'll leave it for the moment. Still to come here on Today on eNCA. We'll look at City Park.